Okay, so what is an index fund? I wanted to provide you an example so that you can kind of have an idea of what an index fund actually is. And first of all, a fund is just simply a sum of money that is collected and allocated for a particular purpose. And that particular purpose is pretty much just investing for some kind of a long-term, short-term, or whatever it may be in terms of a time horizon. So a group of people get together, they throw in money, and then we have a sum of money that we can allocate. Now, an index in itself is actually nothing special. Many people hear of the word an index or an index fund, but they don't know what it is. An index is just simply a number, and it is derived from a set of observations, rules, okay, or measures that you have. And one of the most common indices that you have is the S&P 500, which is the Standard & Poor's 500. For instance, on April 8th, 2020, that particular index was 2,719. So it's just a particular number and it's telling us something. Of course, for us, what we want to know is where that number actually comes from. So let's create, okay, just for kicks, our own particular rules that will create an index or a number for us based on certain things that we have. So typically for any fund or any index that we have an input of companies from all over the world that we can choose from. We have a set of rules that govern which companies we're going to take in and what information about those companies we're going to have. And that might be a list of X amount or N amount of companies. Once we have that, we actually create a formula. And then from that formula, based on numbers, we will get an index number that would be generated for us. So what are these rules that we might have? So here's an example, and I'll do two basic rules. The first rule is I'm only going to take in 5 companies. And it turns out that those 5 companies have the highest market value. And then based on those companies, I will create a little formula and an index, which is just simply a number that you can see how it's created. Now, if I run through, for example, in April or in early April 2020, okay, and take the 5 biggest companies in terms of value, you will find Microsoft, Apple, and Amazon, and Alphabet, and Alibaba amongst those 5. And my index, okay, is only going to take in those companies. It's going to exclude everything else. So what do I need out of those companies? What I need out of those companies is, at least because I am creating the index number, so what I'm going to take is I'm going to take all their valuations, and these are all in billions of dollars. So what you see here in terms of these numbers, these are billions of dollars that we have. So Microsoft is approximately 1.2 trillion in total in terms of its valuation, and so on for the other companies. Now, when you add all of these up, so if I'm going to add these up, then I will get the total valuation for my index that I am creating. So my index formula is basically add up all the values of the valuations of the companies, and now I'm going to divide that valuation by something which we call an index divisor, because we're dividing. And we make this up. And they do the same thing for many of the other indices, like the Dow, like the S&P 500, and many of the others around the world. So I'm going to arbitrarily divide this number as I please, okay, by the following. And if I do that, and now why did I chose this? Because I wanted to start off with a very nice index, which is just simply 100. Because if we take these and we divide them, okay, as we have, then what we will get is an index number of 100. And that is my starting point on a particular day in time. Now, the next day, if I would do the same, notice that the valuations of the companies change because the market values them differently. And now all of a sudden notice that it dipped a little bit in terms of the overall valuation. My index divisor I'm keeping the same. And now as I do the division, it's no longer 100. Now it's dropped down by just a little bit. And you can do this and continuously do this every day to your index, and your index just keeps pumping out a particular number. So let me load up the examples, okay, so that as I was creating this particular index, okay, kind of through the days starting from March the 30th, 2020, and then as it kept going along through several days, just to give you a sense of about how this index comes about. So we started off, notice that we have 100 as our index, which was our starting point. And now, depending on what happens to our valuations in the market, our index adjusts. So what I'm doing is, all I'm doing is I am just simply taking in my valuations, I'm summing them up, and I am dividing by an index divisor, which I have created on my own. And now these valuations, by the way, I'm getting from dogsofthedow.com based on the largest companies by market valuation. And I have done this in several days in a row. So if you notice, for instance, if I go to April 1st, my index has dropped quite a bit. And then if I go to the next day, now it has risen just a little bit because again, the market just fluctuates up and down. And eventually, as you can go through this thing, I also on the right-hand side, okay, have started to put in what percentage of each company is in my index. And here I just wanted to show you, for example, on April the 6th, I had this valuation for all my companies. I had these percentages for all the companies that we had in our index. And I've just listed for convenience, here are the actual stock prices per one share. Now, let's imagine that for our index fund, which wants to buy based on this criteria, we clearly would not be able to buy the entire index for $4.7 trillion. So how does an index fund allocate? Well, let's imagine that we were given $10 million. Now that $10 million has been grouped together by a set of people, and now they want to invest in this index. So the allocation is based on the percentages that you have of the index. So now if I wanted to know how many shares of each that I would be buying, for example, of Microsoft, then all I would do is I would simply take the 26.51% of the $10 million that our fund has, and that would give me 2,651,000. Then I would just simply divide by the stock price, and notice that this is how many shares we would have to purchase of Microsoft for our index fund. And you can do the same thing for all the other companies now as well. And I'm going to do that right there. And now our fund, which started with 10 million, has this many shares in each of the companies. So that's how an index fund actually works. I have made this index up on my own, but any index like the S&P 500 or any others works in a very similar way. All the rules you may not know because sometimes those particular rules might be proprietary, but now you have a sense of what an index actually is. It's just a number based on a simple calculation. Thanks for watching.